It's so great to see you all in person today. I am Jennifer Wheeler, and it's my honor and privilege to serve as the president of the Exeter Area Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us at the 2022 Economic Forecast, and welcome all of you who are joining us on Zoom. This program would not be possible without the support of so many, so please join me in thanking our underwriter, Cambridge Trust, our gold sponsor, D.F. Richard, live stream support from SM Films, and Kim Lindquist, our Director of Events and Marketing, who has organized today's program. So thank you all for your support making today possible. So for how many of you is this your first time here at SST? Wow. That's awesome. I can't think of a better place to have this important conversation than the Seacoast School of Technology, our region's Career Technical Education Center. Most people have heard me say this, I'll say it again. I think programs like SST are so invaluable to our education system and are a critical resource both for our students and for our businesses and employers as they explore the challenges and opportunities that exist in the workforce. So,
you're done.
Okay. Thank you very much. So with that, please join me in welcoming Sharon Wilson, the principal here at SST, who's going to tell us a little bit more about where we're sitting and SST. Sharon.
Thank you, Jen, and thank all of you for coming. One of our favorite things is having people in and having people visit us. Our school is so intricately connected with our workforce partners, and COVID has really been a little bit of a bummer from that perspective. And it is phenomenal to have, actually, the Chamber was the first industry partner I had the privilege of meeting with when I was first appointed principal. So it's very special to me that the first group in is through the Chamber. In addition, our school is doing a lot of incredible things. You're getting to enjoy some of the incredible fruits of our students' labor from culinary. And I'd like to introduce Chef Foray. And she is the master chef who oversees our hospitality events and our culinary students. So thank you, Chef. And thank you to our amazing students as well.
And we're all the students. It's all that.
Yes, but I know that they have no greater cheerleader than you. So I hope you have a wonderful time. I hope you've enjoyed what you have seen today and what you're eating. As I said, working with the community is one of the best things that we do, and it's one of the most enjoyable for us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon, and again, thank you, Chef Foray, for this wonderful breakfast. And I can also put a plug in if you have not yet taken advantage of some of the food offerings that the SST Culinary Arts students have provided around the holidays. You're missing out. It was probably the best turkey pot pie I think I've ever had around Thanksgiving. So, check that out. So the last time we gathered in person for the economic forecast, it was the end of February 2020. And the room was filled with optimism and excitement. And the theme was, the economy is strong and trending positively. So now is a great time to prepare for when it's not. And then it wasn't. So here we are again together in person 2 years later. And our goal in putting this program together was to bring in experts with experience and perspective to help businesses in the community prepare and position themselves for success in the coming year. There are still uncertainties as the pandemic continues to impact our businesses and communities, but as we'll hear from our speakers, there's cause to be optimistic about the path ahead, and we're very much looking forward to the conversation. We'll first hear from Taylor Caswell, Commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Business Affairs, and after Taylor's remarks, we'll hear from Jeff Feingold, Editor of New Hampshire Business Review. Once we hear from Jeff, we'll open up the floor for questions and discussion. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Ryan Pope, Office Manager of the Stratham Branch of Cambridge Trust, who will introduce our speaker. Ryan.
Good morning, everybody.
I'm Ryan Pope from Cambridge Trust, and I wanted to thank everyone for joining us on this lovely morning for this year's economic forecast. I'm a firm believer that community banks like ours exist to serve the needs of our neighbors. And what better way to help our business communities today than to share a glimpse into our shared economic future. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Commissioner Caswell. Taylor Caswell is the first commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs. He was first appointed to the position by Governor Chris Sununu in 2017. Commissioner Caswell serves as the Chief Economic and Marketing Official for the state and oversees the state divisions of economic development and travel and tourism development, enabling and growing economic vitality for residents and employers in the Granite State. In this role, Caswell has defined the narrative of New Hampshire as a place where people want to live and work, and where companies can grow and thrive in the state's unique tax opportunity climate. In collaboration with policymakers, stakeholders, and business leaders, he is working to update and modernize the state's broad infrastructure of community and economic stakeholders into a more strategic and meaningful network that will be critical to sustaining and growing New Hampshire's economy in the next century. Commissioner Caswell.
How are you doing? It's 54 degrees outside. It's great when you're down here, but if you are a North Country resident, this stokes terror in your heart. And it's been actually a pretty good season winter-wise up there with the skiers and everybody else. So I thought I would talk a little bit about what happened in 2021, and then maybe talk a little bit about what we're seeing for 2022. Acknowledging that the last time that you guys all got together, it was a very different situation. And what a year that was. And I got dragged into a number of different roles in my position during that time, not just for the work that we were doing at BEA, where we really transitioned a lot of our activity around promotion and recruitment and marketing and turned that more inward to support for our business community, working with the team at Gopher at that time to advance in all the Main Street relief programs and the GAP programs and the self-employment programs and the nonprofit programs, which really were, I think, critical to leading us to where we are today. And then in September of 2020, the governor asked me to move into another role, not to move from one to another, but to add one, which is the Governor's Office for Economic Relief and Recovery, the Gopher office, which has really been at the heart of a lot of the activity that the state had in deploying resources that were coming, the relief and recovery resources that were coming from the federal government. First in 2020 with the CARES Act, and then later in 2021 with the American Rescue Plan. So those two, and really, I just mentioned it. I think one of the key components of at least our activity under CARES Act, which was in 2020, was roughly about $1.25 billion that came to the state at that time. We invested just about half of that resource into our private sectors and into our employment sectors through the Main Street Relief Program, through a self-employment support program, and through a nonprofit enterprise relief fund, the NERF program. That alone right there was $40 million. And I'd like to highlight that, even though it was roughly about $350 million that went into the two Main Street programs to support our employers, to support the ability for people to keep their head above water. This wasn't an opportunity to come in and repay everybody for every single loss that they had. We tried to spread that across multiple sectors, small business, medium-sized business, and help them continue to provide for themselves if they're a small business, but also for their employees. And I do think that we saw the impact of that when we started to come out, was that a year ago, in January and February of 2021, when we were back down into the 3% unemployment category. Admittedly, that's not the best example of how an economy was going, but it is a benchmark. And we were back at that point. And we were back talking about the things that we had been talking about as challenges to our economy right at that time as well, and that obviously continues. But I pointed out the nonprofit piece because we were one of the few states that made an investment in that sector, a significant investment. It was $40 million that we put towards that. And the reason why, and this is a unique component of the New Hampshire economy that not that I had anything in design to do with the design of it, but it is something that I'm proud of, which is we have a forced collaboration because the state has this unique tax scenario where we don't have an income tax, we don't have a sales tax, and for a lot of people that means we don't have the revenue to be able to do these huge projects that like a Massachusetts or a Connecticut might do. But there's another value there that people often miss, which is when we don't have the capacity necessarily to have the big government solution to every problem that comes up, we do force ourselves to have these strong, tight relationships with our nonprofits, whether they're in the health sector, whether they're in the employment sector, whether they're in a YMCA or a Boys and Girls Club that's supporting people's ability to work. Those are relationships that are not just on paper. Those are the people that we bring in when we talk about what are the relief programs that we need to have in the state to make the biggest impact. Those are the people that we were talking to. Those are the people that participate in that conversation at a level I don't think you necessarily see in a lot of other states. And so that, to me, being sort of in the position that I was in, was a bright spot that I held on to. That cooperation, collaboration, the relationship that we developed over the course of the pandemic with the chambers of commerce around the state. And we had at the time 50 different chambers of commerce that were all sort of very hyper-focused, hyper-local on what that was going on in their regions. When we had the pandemic hit, when we had COVID thrust in front of us, it forced us to say, how can we work together on a state and a more regional basis to have the biggest impact? And we've worked closely with the chambers, much more closely than we had previously during the pandemic, and that continues to this day. To have a recognition of what are the key challenges to the state and how can we have local and regional execution of strategies to address those things. And sort of at the center of that is something that we did work on and that we're now continuing to work on at the state level with partners like the chambers, which is our economic recovery and expansion strategy, which is on our website. Something that we put together. It's a little bit of a funny story in the sense that when I first took over, when we started BEA, we had to put together a state economic development plan, and we went through a process of doing that. That you would do for an economic plan, where you're out reaching out to different people, you're doing interviews, you're having meetings, you're getting all the input, and you're putting it together into a big plan and sort of forward-looking and all that sort of thing. And we had it, and we were ready to go in February of 2020, right? And then, of course, we all know what happened. And then he took that, and we're like, well, this doesn't seem totally appropriate at this moment. So we went back and gave it a second look. And went back to a lot of those same parties and tried to look into the crystal ball there and think about what are the issues that now, looking at COVID and looking at some point of having some sort of a post-COVID existence, I don't think we can call it that anymore, but an adaptation, I guess. And what are the opportunities that come that are in front of us that we could be taking advantage of as a result of this, and try to look at it in a glass is half full sort of way. And advance so many of the things that we've been talking about for years and decades in some cases, and it's led us to things like the relationship that we have with the chambers, the relationship that we have with regional planning commissions and economic development corporations, to try to talk about how can we make these pieces go together and function in a way where we can recognize that there are regional distinctions to the economies in New Hampshire. For our teeny tiny state, what's happening up in Coas County and northern Grafton County is an entirely different situation than what's happening here in Rockingham County. But it doesn't mean that we should try to force down the throats of everybody some sort of like broad state program. We want to have some regionalization to that. And so we've been trying really hard to bring the people together that work in this space whether it's housing, whether it's academics, whether it's training, universities, community colleges, employers, municipalities. Get all of them regionally together and start talking about, what is it that is unique about this part of the state, and what are our strengths, and how can we really advance those. But one I would say, and I'm skipping to 2022 now, one of that I would say that is a huge issue for us right now, and one that we're really sort of about to embark on some significant programming, is in the housing space. And that's one where it doesn't matter where you are in New Hampshire right now. The housing is our biggest roadblock and obstacle for our continued economic growth. And I think traditionally people hear that and they're like, oh God, here comes another effort to pave over all of our forests and turn it into single-family homes and all the rest of it. That is not the case. I think the challenge on the housing side is, at this point in time, the guy who's responsible for billions of dollars in this relationship. My whole idea of what is a reasonable program size financially has been completely warped by the amount of federal money that we have coming into New Hampshire, but it presents an opportunity, right? And so you start thinking about, we could have like $1 billion that we could put exclusively towards housing development in New Hampshire, whether it's multifamily, single family, whatever community might work. But that's going to do us no good unless we have some honest conversations around planning and zoning and the regulatory environment that we throw up when this sort of discussion begins. And I think that, for me, this whole planning zoning thing has taken on a bit of a, in some communities, a negative feel to it. But if you look at, and somehow we're impinging on property rights and all this sort of thing, I think that if you look at taking advantage of having some opportunity to discuss in your community where, if you were going to have housing, you would want to put that housing. It has to do with where your transportation networks are, what your infrastructure looks like, where's the best broadband service, because that's important, and water and sewer and all of the things that have to go as part of that. And you plan for that. And you use your zoning and planning regimes for that purpose, not the purpose of saying, oh no, we're not going to do any of that kind of thing. Now, there might be some communities that continue to do that, but I've been trying now for 3 sessions of the legislature to pass some meaningful housing initiatives, and each time we get knocked down. And it's frustrating because there are so many communities in New Hampshire that I refer to them as communities of the willing. They're ready to go. They're ready to say, we'll do this sort of thing, but we need some additional tools, whether it's financing or whatever the case might be. Well, we have that now. We have some money, and we're going to be putting some money towards housing, workforce housing, whatever you want to call it. We just need housing, right? But we have to have an opportunity to have that relationship with the communities of the willing, so that they can move on this, and that the communities can see that this is not going to destroy New Hampshire. It's not going to destroy your community. It's going to enhance your community. It's going to create economic opportunity for people. And it's going to, whether it's regionally or locally or however we want to look at it, it is critical to our ability to continue to have the economy that we have. Now, by the same token, we know that the reason why people are moving here, and they are, we see our net migration numbers have been continuously in the positive for the last couple of years, not in any sort of groundbreaking, going to change the world type of numbers, but they jumped significantly in 2021. So we know people are coming here. We can see it. I can see it in the communities. I can see where I live. I can see where I go. But the reason why people are coming, in a lot of cases, particularly the populations that we want, the 25 to 44 range, is because of our access to our natural assets, the quality of life that you have in our communities, outdoor recreation, the ability to go mountain biking or skiing on Tuesdays instead of just on the weekends. That's big, and it's bigger than people recognize, right? And so whatever we do, whether when we're recruiting people or we're building housing, you need to bear that in mind as well. And that, again, circles back to some planning and some, the way that you plan your community to accommodate that and to link it with other programs and other initiatives in the state. So we established an outdoor recreation office, and this is the purpose of this office. It is not necessarily to go out and promote outdoor recreation and to put flashy ads. We do that through our tourism team. but it is about what is one of the major reasons companies, people, and students come to New Hampshire. It's because of our quality of life and outdoor access, right? And so starting to integrate that into those discussions, I think that just adds a lot more benefit to the solutions that are going to come out of it. And it is, again, an opportunity for us to make investments and institutionalize a lot of these types of approaches. And so that's kind of where we're headed. In 2022, you can see a lot more of that type of activity. How do we promote our outdoors? How do we promote people? How do we use tourism as the tip of the spear to say to people like, yeah, it's great to come on a weekend, but this is a heck of a place to live. And there are a lot of different communities in town. The Chambers just did this thing the other day. I don't know if you heard about the woman on The Price is Right out in LA. And she went to like the Showcase Showdown. Not that I watch Price is Right. But she gets it. She wins, and like the big in her package is a trip to New Hampshire.
And she's from Boston.
Yeah. So they're like, yeah. She's like, well, this is great, but I live in Boston. Right? So she won round trip airfare from LA to New Hampshire, and so anyway, she didn't seem all that excited about it. That got a lot of attention. Boston media loved that one, right? So they picked up on that. But the Chambers jumped in, and we had our teams had some discussion over the last few days, and they put together a package of really awesome stuff you can do in New Hampshire with all of our tourism and hospitality partners around the state, and turned that sort of funny little kitschy bad news story, Boston poking us sort of thing, into a really good story. So now she's going to be able to come to New Hampshire, and she's going to have this whole host of different activities to be able to go and enjoy. And People magazine picked this up yesterday, and we were on the front page in a People exclusive, and it had links to every one of the places that the Chambers had put together, and pictures to an audience of millions and millions of people. We just sort of turned that thing around. But that's the sort of partnership, that's the sort of use of our outdoor assets to promote a state that has so many benefits that all of us are very aware of. And to be able to have that discussion in a serious way, now with some resources behind us, to solve the issues that so many employers are having about not having enough workforce, not having enough places for people to live. I hear from employers all over the state, I need to hire more people, I get someone on board, and there's literally nowhere for them to live. Whether it's here or whether it's in the Upper Valley, we've got to do something about that. We can't just be like, oh, it'll work itself out. We're at the point now where things have to happen. So we're going to be making investments in those sort of things. We're going to continue to grow partnerships that we have with our chambers and with others, and it is all in the context of assisting our employer community to meet the challenges that they're having, so that they continue to grow and flourish and make New Hampshire's economy the way that it has been and will continue to be. So I've probably gone longer. Sorry, Jeff. But those are some of the things that I wanted to talk about. And we'll have some time for questions later, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let me also add my thanks. Speaking of the partnership with all the chambers, I've had the good fortune of being a part of those phone calls for the last 2 years with you and the other chambers across the state. And I've enjoyed the time, I've enjoyed your transparency in those calls, and I've enjoyed the dialogue and the partnership, so thank you for that. And the winner of The Price is Right will be enjoying one of the many $6,500 worth of goodies in New Hampshire. We'll also be enjoying tickets to the Great Bay Food Truck Festival on May 7th. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Jeff Feingold, editor of New Hampshire Business Review. Jeff's been a journalist for over 40 years. In that time, he's worked as a reporter and editor at weekly and daily newspapers in New Jersey and New Hampshire. He's also worked as a freelance writer for state, regional, and national publications, including the New York Times and The Nation, and has been a longtime guest on public affairs shows on radio and TV, and is host of New Hampshire Business Review's weekly Down to Business podcast. He's taught journalism at the New England College and writing at Granite State College, and is a member of the board of directors of Catch Neighborhood Housing, an organization that develops and manages affordable housing in New Hampshire. He's also served 6 years as one of the first 3 male members of the New Hampshire Women's Foundation Board. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Jen. And I want to thank the Chamber for inviting me. I was here a few years ago when things were different and I didn't have to look at people wearing masks. But I want to thank the Chamber. And also, I have to say, I just want to echo the importance of this building, this institution right here, the Seacoast School of Technology, because I'm going to get into this a little bit. But, you know, the state, I don't have to tell anybody here, has very serious workforce issues. And so many of the careers and trades that are being taught here are essential for the future of the state's economy. I mean, I'm sure the commissioner would agree with that 100%, and that this is like a treasure. We should be having more of these around the state. I know there are others, and it's really important for us in the future. All right, enough of that. Anyway, I had a bunch of remarks, and I just wanted to say something that when I was listening to what the commissioner was saying, he said something about the importance of housing, and I just wanted to set that aside, and I want to talk about that for just a second. As I talked about, we have serious workforce issues. And I think a major part of that is that we have an affordable housing, I'd say, crisis. It's very, very difficult to find a place to live if you aren't wealthy in many parts of the state. And that includes even when it comes to finding rental space. And by that, because of that, we are inadvertently either telling young people we don't want you here, or they're just saying, I don't want, I have to find someplace else to live, I have to find someplace else to work. And that's really not a very good thing for the state. So, I mean, I know I'm on the board of an affordable housing development organization, but I see it really up close, how important this is. But the other thing is that I just want to point out, the New Hampshire Business Review, we're part of the Granite State News Collaborative. And we are helping to spearhead a year-long project on zoning in New Hampshire. And we've made some pretty eye-opening revelations about specifically Manchester right now. But in the long term, we'll be looking at zoning from a statewide perspective. And I think that a lot of communities think they're doing really well for themselves by having restrictive zoning. But in the long term, for the health of the state and for the health of these very communities, they really should consider putting in more affordable housing, whether it's a multifamily, and we've talked, I'm sure you've heard this phrase, the middle market housing or whatever, the housing that is like maybe 2 deckers, 3 deckers, 4 deckers, the missing middle housing. And in a lot of communities you can't build, basically because of height restrictions or maybe because of land use restrictions. But in the long run, they're shooting themselves in the foot because you're preventing young people from moving into your community. And by accident, you're preventing young people from moving into the state to take jobs because, unfortunately, you're looking at me, I'm 67, I'm a pretty typical New Hampshire person. We're an older state and we want to get younger. And one way we could do that is by addressing the housing problem, addressing the zoning barriers, and also, by another extent, is to welcome immigrants, not just people from other states, but welcome immigrants. I had a piece online just the other day about the 15.3% of the tech jobs in the state are held by immigrants from other countries, which sounds great, but nationally it's 25%. Because those are people with the skills and the abilities, and we really need to do more to attract people to come to New Hampshire. I'll get off my soapbox right now, but I really want you to think about that. It's all connected. Housing is very much connected to everything. But I also want to talk a little bit about the numbers, because the New Hampshire economy is in really very, very strong shape right now. I didn't want to get anybody down at the beginning, but what the heck, that's my nature. But I'll give you the bad news first. But anyway, the economy is really strong. We have a unemployment rate of 2.6%, which is just amazing. But it's obviously in New Hampshire has been on track to recover all of the jobs we've lost before, since the pandemic by the end of the year, maybe even sooner. Of course, except for the elephant in the room, who knows what kind of strain comes up next? We don't know, but let's just assume that things will be some kind of a normal where we'll be able to adapt. So, if we can adapt to COVID, and COVID is kinder to us than it has been, New Hampshire will be on track to be probably the first state in the entire Northeast to regain all of its jobs. And I got that from Brian Gottlieb, who I'm sure most of you know. He's an economist from Dover. He's now the director of the State Employment and Labor Market Information Bureau. And I spoke with him in detail in preparation for this. And he said that this is really something that New Hampshire could be really proud of. It shows an inner strength of the New Hampshire economy. And this is despite some of the issues we face. So this is an important thing to remember. But one hitch in that is that we have lost a lot of people in the workforce in the last couple of years. And one of the other things that Brian said was that if the labor force participation rates in New Hampshire were the same as they were in 2019 as they are today, there'd be 12,000 more people in the workforce. So people have just said, I'm gone. And that exacerbates an already acute labor shortage. So this is something that's really holding back our businesses from becoming even stronger, and our economy from becoming even stronger is this labor force participation. I don't know how you fix that. I think one of the things is maybe we really should address the child care issue in the state, because I think that plays a big role in it. It's keeping a lot of women out of the workforce right now. Unfortunately, it's women because, unfortunately, women even today bear the burden of child raising and child rearing in our society. But this is something that's a key thing that should be addressed by the state. I'm not talking about investing, but just to make people aware of this. And I think the federal government is also very aware of it, and that might happen someday. And as the commissioner said before, another thing that's a very positive thing for New Hampshire is that we are attracting people to live here. I go back to the 80s and since I've been here in 81, and those are the days of the Golden Triangle, and people just came up in hordes from Massachusetts in particular, and businesses came up, and we had major like Digital and Apollo Computer and all these other businesses that moved up to New Hampshire. It's not like that right now, but it is a very positive thing for the state to have a net in-migration, as opposed to other states around us who are not. That's not happening. I think, like I say, like Connecticut is losing people a lot. New York's losing people, but New Hampshire's gaining people. It might not be in the numbers of the 80s and 90s, but it's still pretty strong. One other positive thing that we should know about the New Hampshire economy is the level of business formation. There's been a big uptick in new businesses being formed in the pandemic. And that's a sign of people saying, I don't want to work for somebody. That could also have something to do with labor force participation. But it also means there's some kind of confidence in the future of the state, in the future of the economy of the state, that people are willing to take a chance, even in pretty uncertain times. They're not as uncertain as they were 2 years ago, obviously, thank goodness, but it's still a risk. And we still have a lot of entrepreneurs in the state who are saying, I want to try this, I want to do this. And I think that's a very positive thing for the state. I did have a couple other points I wanted to make, and I think there is two things that we need to be aware of as we go forward this year. Is that three, COVID aside, three major issues, but let's talk about two, and it's supply chain and inflation, and they go hand in hand. Now, the supply chain was directly caused by COVID. That just brought the international supply chain to basically a screeching halt. And we're still trying to recover from that right now. But that affects every business around. There's no business is immune from the supply chain issues. I just saw a quote in, I think it was a New York Times article today, that a builder said, I used to be able to build a house in 20 weeks. Now it takes me 20 weeks to get a garage door. And that's, and that really wasn't much of an exaggeration. It's true I've talked to builders in New Hampshire who they wait months now to get a refrigerator or a washing machine. And that's just on the housing side. You know, we're talking about manufacturers who have to come up with they've jerry-rigged their supply chains to make sure they have things. It goes across the whole, like retailers, you know, and that's also, what I'm going to say is that COVID caused the supply chain issue. The supply chain issues have caused this inflation we see, which is really the worst it's been since the 80s. We were talking about it before the event began. Is that in the 80s, you'd have interest rates in the teens. Mortgage rates were 10, 12, 15%, and that was because of the reaction to the inflation of the late 70s, early 80s, and that was Paul Volcker, who was the Fed chairman, and said they're going to squeeze this inflation out, and he did a great job because it lasted for a long time. He squeezed it out of the economy for a long time, but the supply chain, COVID, really has made inflation a scary thing again. And these are things that are not in New Hampshire's control, and neither is COVID, obviously. But these are things that are on the horizon that we need to think about. Even though we in New Hampshire are living in this, we're not in a vacuum. We aren't living in a vacuum. We're living as part of a global economy, but we are really doing very well compared to many, many, many other states. And that's something to be happy about and proud of, really. I mean, I think it's the resilience of this economy is really just pretty amazing when I think about all these years I've lived here and seeing the ups and downs. We've seen real estate depressions, and the state and we've been able to survive this. We had an unemployment rate of about 16% in April of 2020, and now it's 2.6. That's a good comeback. So it's something that we really should be happy about. So, I know that I bummed you out at the beginning, or maybe I didn't bum you out, but maybe made you aware a little bit more of the concerns that there are. There are a lot of concerns, but on the whole, considering the governor's giving his State of the State address probably right now, I'm starting it. The state of the state's economy is really good, but it could be better, and it's something to think about as we go forward in the year and going into the future. So I'll be here to take your questions, and thanks very much for inviting me.
I really appreciate your time today. Before we close, I want to again thank our sponsors, our underwriter Cambridge Trust, gold sponsor DF Richard, series sponsor Exeter Hospital, and live stream support from SMM Films. So, yep, I heard some. That works too. I was going to say clapping, but the fireworks. I'm going to say the fireworks, but maybe just some clapping. A sincere thank you to our two speakers today, Commissioner Caswell and Jeff Feingold, for joining us and sharing their perspectives and for the conversation. To the team at the Seacoast School of Technology for hosting us today. And of course, to all of you for taking the time not only to join us today, but for the thoughtful conversation and discussion. The strength of our chamber and our community comes from the connection that we make with one another, and we are so grateful for the connection that we've made with all of you. Breakfast will continue to be available for another 15 or so minutes, so please enjoy the wonderful treats here, and again, great to see you. Have a great day.